carried her around. We all changed her diapers for her. And we made sure that she was fed. We did a lot of things for her, and in doing so, she got used to being taken care of. So when it came time for her to stand on her own 2 feet, there was a little bit of a problem there. So, the last sentence of verse 6, though, is significant. And Joseph's brother came and bowed down before him being Joseph, with their faces to the earth. This is very, very intriguing. The brothers don't recognize that it is Joseph. That's part of the issue. But the other part of the problem is, what was Joseph's dream that they hated him for? Because he told them that in the dream that his other brothers, the whole family, bowed down to him. And they poo-pooed that and, didn't want to hear it, and caused a lot of resentment, which turned it into hate. Yeah. Had they realized who Joseph was, they wouldn't have thought that maybe now his dream was so far-fetched. But they bowed to his authority. Why? Because the custom of Egypt back then required them to. They're looking at the guy that is designated as the second most powerful guy in Egypt. So, Joseph, though, does something that they didn't. He recognizes them. It says, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. So, very interesting. He doesn't treat them very well, publicly. Now, there are a lot of commentators that have made comments about this particular reaction on the part of Joseph. And they express a variety of opinions as to why Joseph reacts in the manner that he does to his brothers. Some berate Joseph as, for his treatment of his own brothers. But think about the situation. Others, even go further, and express the opinion that Joseph is being vindictive. Well, as we read this story further, what we'll be able to do is decide for ourselves whether that is true or not. Because I disagree with those people. I can think of a couple of really logical reasons why this is a perfectly normal and rational response on the part of Joseph. Why? Think about where they are. They're in Egypt. And what are they? Hebrews. They're also shepherds. Something that the Egyptians looked down their nose at. The shepherds were lower than dirt, according to the Egyptians. When you've got an advanced society of people that, are using calculus and other things to be able to build these pyramids, aqueducts, and everything else, you can see why some people would look down their nose at a shepherd. But the other things I think are more practical reasons that I see. Think about Joseph. Put yourself in his sandals for a second. He hasn't seen his family in 20 years. And by this time, he's probably of the opinion that he's never going to see them again. He realizes that even though he's risen to this position of authority, who holds onto his liberty and freedom? Pharaoh. So, he can't be, doing things. So, he now spies these men coming to buy grain from him. And he recognizes them as his own brothers. So his Hebrew brothers are now bowing before him. Joseph has to deal, first of all, with his own emotions. Think about that. You know, here are the guys that have caused him to be where he's at. There's shock, I think, upon seeing them. Because he has said to himself what most of us would say, what are the chances that I would ever see them again? There was amazement because they don't recognize him. And think about why. He looks like an Egyptian, talks like an Egyptian. You know, remember the one that said about the duck? If it quacks, you know, waddles like a duck, looks like a duck, smells like a duck, it's probably a duck. Okay? So, what I find interesting is neither faction, the brothers aren't expecting to see Joseph, and Joseph's not expecting to see his brother. So, it's kind of interesting. So, I would, before I made any big overture to these brothers, to these Hebrews, there's a couple of things I would take, you know, in this position, I would take into account. First, Joseph doesn't, I think, want to create a stir with his Egyptian staff. They're watching and we're seeing how he deals with the various people that come to buy, you know, grain from him. I could envision that there's very likely a great deal of resentment in that staff as well, because they have to answer to a Hebrew. Think about putting in, you know, that someone in that kind of a position. It's often, I've seen it done on several levels during my professional career. They take somebody that apparently is either an outsider or a nobody, and they put them at the top of the, you know, the authority chain. And all of a sudden, everybody has to dance to that person's tune. Well, sometimes it goes well, most of the time it doesn't. There's a lot of resentment. Because there's a lot of people been working hard for the same company for a number of years, and they don't get promoted to that position. So there's resentment. Joseph also, I think, has experienced how that emotion, you know, work in a person. And he's wise enough to prevent them from seeing that what he's doing is he's dealing with his own family. Because they could then be put in prison, they could be, you know, put into slavery and working, you know. So he doesn't want to upset their apple cart. Second, I think the most important thing is God is at work in Joseph, and the Holy Spirit is urging him to maintain his cool. Because there's things that God wants to accomplish through all of this. So, he's being told to proceed cautiously, to not make a big stir of it, and to show some restraint. So the fact that he talks roughly to them probably would soothe a lot of these situations. And lastly, God is working in both sides of this reunion. Think about that. We saw it with Esau and Jacob, that God worked in both hearts. Because a true reconciliation can only happen one way. That is, that both parties come with forgiveness in their hearts and a sincere desire to make this reconciliation. So, and Jacob himself was the problem I think, in the reconciliation between him and his brother Esau. He never arrived at the point because Jacob could never bring himself to trust Esau. He always thought that Esau would turn on him at some point. So it's an interesting study to see how we project onto others thoughts, methods, things that we might do to them if we're in their position. So, very interesting how those things occur. And we probably, the older ones of us in this room, have seen it in our own families for years. I know I've been dealing with one for the last 6 years. Well, actually 4 years, because my brother, when he passed away, the farm came back up as a bone of contention. Who should get it? Well, interestingly enough, he owned the title deed to it, my brother. He had a single son. So guess who was the heir to his whatever he gets? So Aaron ended up with the farm. But Aaron lives in San Francisco. He's a banker, financial wizard. And he never wanted anything to do with the farm. My son loved being on the farm when we'd go there in the summer and visit. He was 4 feet from the time we showed up until the time we left, because he was out there driving the tractors, working in the woods. He loved all of that. Aaron hated it, detested it. Couldn't wait to get as far away from it. Look where he's living. The farm's in Maine. He's in San Francisco. Could he get any farther away? So, these bones of contention, though, see, rear their ugly head in families. So this is what we're seeing, I think, here. And God is in the middle of it. He's working on Joseph, and he's working on the brothers. And what we discover is going to be interesting. Let's read verses 8 through 17. So Joseph recognized his brother, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them, and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord," small l, "but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." But he presses the issue. He says to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I spoke to you, saying, 'You are spies.' In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he put them all together in prison for a day. Okay. So Joseph decides to test his brothers to see what's going on. They don't know that he is their brother Joseph. And they don't know a couple of other important things that get revealed here. So properly understand this interchange, I think we must remind ourselves of the relationship between these 10 and the last 2 brothers. Remember, there's 4 women that gave birth to all of these 12. First, they are what we would call half-brothers, meaning that they don't all share the same 2 parents. 4 different women gave birth to the 12 sons. Second, there is certainly an age disparity here, which precludes a closeness or harmony, I think, between the older ones and the younger ones. I remember my older brother and I, and my sister, that's a year younger than me, the 3 of us were very close. Trying to relate to someone that's 12 years younger than you is a little difficult. Mary, my wife here, can testify to that because there's 4 children in her family. Each child is separated from the previous one by 6 years. When I was dating her and she was 20, 21 years old, her brother Robert was 3. And I used to show up with my motorcycle helmet on, and he would start screaming because he thought I was the creature from the Black Lagoon, or something. But, so, there's an age disparity. And the other thing is, I look at these 12, I am led to believe that there's a very distinct possibility that not all of them share the same faith. You know how that happens in families? It's amazing what that will do, too. That will cause separation. It seems entirely possible to me that the only true Hebrews at this time in that family are Joseph and Benjamin. Because the older ones were very willing to sell him into slavery or kill him, weren't they? And they didn't want anything to do with his coat of many colors. So, accordingly, Joseph himself decides to put them through the ringer a little bit. He accuses them of being spies, which would be a natural thing that an Egyptian would do to someone from a foreign country, particularly during a famine. The brothers deny the accusation, asserting that they're only here to buy food. Well, that's good. Joseph, though, repeats the accusation, saying that they are there to determine Egypt's level of weakness because of the famine. The brothers revealed, though, in response to that, their family history. Very interesting. There are 12 brothers, or 12 sons of the same man, 4 different women. One brother has died, and one is the youngest one is with their father in Canaan. They are being very honest at this point, because I think they don't have much of a choice. They know that, this powerful man could have them committed to prison, and he's about to do so, just to give them, a hint of his authority. So Joseph gives them a clue, which they don't even pick up on. He repeats his assertion that they are spies, but he doesn't dispute the fact that the youngest is not with them. Now, how would a foreigner know that? He doesn't dispute that. If Joseph were, how would he corroborate that fact? So, that's very interesting, this first interchange. And then the very last verse that we read, so he put them all together in prison for 3 days. Interesting. Wants them to have time to think about this. Let's go on. Starting there at verse 18. Then Joseph said to them the 3rd day, do this and live, for I fear God. That should have been another clue to them. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother. For we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, that's the oldest brother, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So, the scene continues. A couple of things have happened while the brothers spent 3 days in prison, I think. Joseph has had time to think. He obviously wants to see Benjamin before he reveals who he is to his other brothers. Remember, in his dream, all of his brothers have to bow down before him. So the brothers have also had time, though, to think and to talk. I would bet that they have had quite a conversation concerning their situation, wouldn't you? They have discussed once again what they did to Joseph, though. Very interesting. That is a central topic to their lives because it's an unresolved issue. Joseph, though, has he's devised a new strategy. Instead of, sending one person back, he's going to send 9 of them back and keep one. Why? Because he wants a guarantee that they will return for him. That will also tell him something else, very important. Where is their heart relative to the fact of what they did with Joseph? If they come back to this brother and they sold him into slavery and haven't gone looking for him, you see, he wants to see that there's been a change of heart. So, he decides to keep one of them while the others return to Canaan. And that's also practical, because they're carrying got animals with grain, on them. And it takes more than one man to be able to do that. So, then Joseph overhears their conversation, which is conducted in their native language, Hebrew. But they don't know that's his native language, and he knows what they're saying because he talked to them through an interpreter. He learns what really happened, and he learns something very important, that Reuben actually tried to dissuade them from killing him. So that's an important piece of information for him. So Joseph, though, he knows, okay, who's the wild one then? Who's the one that still wanted to do that? And who's the one that most likely, caused him to be sold to the slave traders? Simeon. So Joseph chooses Simeon to be the one to remain in jail while the others return to Canaan, and then the grain has to, be used up before they're going to return back for more. So there's going to be a considerable amount of time before they return. But think about what's going through Simeon's mind. I think he's wondering whether he will be betrayed or how long he's going to be in prison before they return. I think that this is God working in several people's lives, and he wants Simeon to understand what he put his brother Joseph through. He knows, Joseph knows they won't discover the return wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. He's getting a taste of his own medicine. And what that medicine is called is uncertainty. When you don't know whether or not your brothers are going to come back for you, and you certainly know that your father is dead set against sending Benjamin with them, there's a possibility that they may not show up again. So, verses 25 through 28. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Look at that. What a blessing that is. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey's feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, "My money has been restored, and there it is in my sack." Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" They think God is doing that. Right, we'll talk about that. So, then they went to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan. And what did they do? They told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan.' Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, 'By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your household, and be gone.'" Okay. So, what we see is that Joseph takes care of his family, doesn't he? Is this the guy that's vindictive? I don't think so. He oversees the loading of the grain, and he orders his people to return the money in those sacks, so that his brothers won't know he's actually given them their food supply. Hasn't they will discover that they haven't had to pay for it. He knows that they won't discover the return of the money until they're either on the way back, away from the prying eyes of the Egyptians, or they won't realize it until they actually unload the sack when they get back to Canaan. So what does he do? What we see him doing is he's providing food for the men. He's providing food for the men for the trip. And so, these to me are not the actions of a man seeking retribution for being mistreated by his siblings. It just doesn't wash. Joseph is taking care of them handsomely. And he's giving them back their money. That's another interesting thing. To me, these are the actions of a man who is providing for his family because he knows that there's plenty there in the land of Egypt. And he cares about their well-being. So, and there's no way that Benjamin could be sent to him if Benjamin is starving. So, very interesting. So let's read the most of the rest of this. So let's go back to verse 33. Then the Lord of the country, said to us, "By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me." Very direct statement. "So I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land." That's the condition for them, for him, Simeon being free. Then it happened as they